Ukraine's final stronghold is hit, and Russia pays a $2.5 billion price. On September 28, 2025, the peaceful skies over Odesa suddenly turned deadly. 5 Russian NK cruise missiles, launched from the frigate Admiral Gva, some 180 kilometers off the coast, tore through the night. Their mission to destroy Ukraine's Western Naval Base. This base had become the Navy's last stronghold after the fall of Sevastopol. As Kalibr missiles rained down on Odesa, Ukraine's air defenses sprang to life, interceptors carving silver arcs through smoke and flame. The city shuddered, but endured. Crews at the Western Naval Base stood unbroken. Then a new command, forged in determination rather than rage, took shape. Operation Iron Swarm was launched from secret sites. 540 drones rose, no stealth giants, just cheap machines guided by precision. Their mission pierced Russia's heart. Their target, Severnaya shipyard in St. Petersburg, pride of Russia's submarine fleet and the cradle of the Yasen-class nuclear attack submarines. Each drone cost less than $2,000, but together they aimed to penetrate Russia's multi-billion-dollar defenses. Would Ukraine's gamble pay off or spark a wider war? The answer began that foggy dawn. On September 28, 2025, at around 0340, the Black Sea was strangely calm until the radar screens at the Western Naval Base near Odesa suddenly lit up 5 sharp streaks of light. The officer on duty was stunned. These were not random lights. They moved at speeds exceeding 550 miles per hour and flew in deadly straight lines. A warning flashed on the control panel. Kalibr NK cruise missiles had been launched from the Russian frigate Admiral Gva, lurking 180 kilometers offshore. Their flight path left no doubt they intended a direct strike on Ukraine's last major naval stronghold since the fall of Sevastopol. If this base fell, Ukraine's Black Sea defenses would collapse. Inside the control bunker, Commander Oleg Morozov slammed his fist on the intercom. "Activate NASAMS, all units to combat positions," he ordered. The NASAMS S-3 air defense system roared to life. Interceptors shot into the sky like silver arrows. 3 Russian missiles were destroyed in mid-air at an altitude of about 6,000 meters. Burning fragments fell into the sea in columns of white smoke. But 2 missiles slipped through the interceptor net. At approximately 0347, the first missile struck. It hit 2 Ukrainian patrol boats moored at the dock. The explosion tore a 600-ton ship apart, sending warped steel across the harbor. Seconds later, the second warhead struck the eastern part of the base, detonating inside a maintenance shed. A fireball engulfed hangars and supply depots. In less than a minute, a third of the base was paralyzed. Radar arrays were bent, cranes toppled, fuel lines ruptured, black columns of smoke billowed into the night sky. 23 sailors were killed instantly, 57 were injured, and critical infrastructure was reduced to twisted steel. The attack forced an immediate halt to grain exports through the Odesa corridor, raising fears of economic aftershocks across Eastern Europe. The Black Sea had gone from quiet to hell, but this was only the beginning. In Kiev, a response was being planned that would send shockwaves all the way to St. Petersburg. At about 0410 in the command center, the room was silent, except for the hissing of oxygen masks and the crackle of live broadcasts from Odesa. A single image filled the wall, the Western Naval Base in flames. Patrol boats ripped to ruins, scores dead and wounded, a third of the base paralyzed. For the Ukrainian Naval Command, this was not merely an attack, it was a public challenge. General Mikhailo Romanenko, head of the Joint Operations Command, stood motionless. His hands clenched, his words were sharp. If they hit us in the heart, we will hit them in the veins, he said. Within minutes, orders were transmitted across encrypted networks from a rear airbase. Ukrainian engineers had prepared 540 combat drones, a fleet that combined precision and deception, 40 Sparrow drones, 7 electronic warfare drones equipped with signal jammers and decoys, and 300 Stingray ER suicide UAVs. Each suicide drone carried a 12-kilogram armor-piercing warhead and used terrain-following guidance, individually cheap. Together they packed the punch of a billion-dollar arsenal, their mission blind, confuse, then incinerate. At 04:58, the skies over Kiev trembled as engines roared to life. The swarms took off in waves, stretching more than 12 kilometers into the sky, soaring north in a storm of wings. The pain of loss in Odesa had turned to rage, deliberate, defined, and directed. Ukraine was no longer merely on the defensive. It was about to strike where Russia would feel the most pain. What do you think can drones costing $2,000 really bring down a fortress guarded by billion-dollar systems at 05:23 a.m.? The northern sky was tinged with the first light of dawn. Operators were dozing when suddenly the radar screens at Severnaya shipyard lit up with warning signals. The 91N6E Big Bird long-range radar detected hundreds of rapidly approaching targets. Panic ensued. The order was given: activate all defense systems immediately. Minutes later, the Panzer S-1 battery roared to life, scanning the horizon. The Russian command center near Kronstadt shouted a single word: mass attack. From the launchers, a wall of missiles erupted. 48 S-400 interceptors tore through the air, forming a deadly umbrella over the Baltic seaport. In just a few seconds, nearly 240 drones were destroyed. Glowing embers rained down like snow. But this was only a decoy. While Russian radar operators focused on the chaos above, the real attackers were already moving in. 300 Stingray ER drones skimmed just 15 meters above the Neva River, slipping under radar coverage. By the time Russian gunners noticed, it was too late. At 05:39, the first wave struck the submarine assembly hangar. Explosions ripped through steel scaffolding and ignited fuel tanks. Seconds later, more drones hit the steel foundry and welding shop, causing secondary explosions that shook the entire shipyard. It didn't stop there. A second explosion tore through shipyard number 3, where 3 Yasen-class hulls were under construction. The pressure wave flattened scaffolding and tossed steel sheets like paper. Minutes later, fuel tanks erupted, sending flames 70 meters high, visible across the Neva. Shockwaves shattered 200 windows in nearby districts. Workers fled in panic, some jumping into the icy river. Trapped engineers shouted over the radio. "There's a fire in Sector 12, we're losing control." At 05:51, a series of explosions followed. 13 blasts thundered in succession. Fireballs soaring up to 60 meters tore through the industrial area. A warehouse housing submarine turbines collapsed in flames. A massive paint warehouse crumbled into molten rubble. An engine test tank ruptured, spilling tens of thousands of gallons of burning fuel into the river. Witnesses described the scene as apocalyptic, a fiery crater where the shipyard once stood. Many were trapped in the chaos. 196 were injured, and 75 people were confirmed dead. Their cries for help were drowned out by the roar of the explosions. The flames rose so high that low-orbit satellites captured the inferno, broadcasting it worldwide. The Severnaya shipyard, Russia's pride in submarine production, was incinerated in just 12 minutes. Drones had achieved in minutes what manned crews or bombers would have taken hours to accomplish billions of dollars in damage. Property destroyed, and production wiped out. Before Russian command could stabilize communications, the Black Sea offensive had already been bloody. But here in the north, Ukraine had shattered something far more profound: Russia's sense of invulnerability in its own heartland. The real shock was not just the explosions, but the aftermath. By 07:00 a.m., the morning after the fire, Moscow's defense ministry rushed to declare victory. Official reports claimed all drones had been intercepted and that Russia's defenses remained strong. But the truth could not be hidden. Commercial satellites, civilian smartphone images, and leaked video told a different story. Half of the Severnaya shipyard lay in ruins. The scale of the devastation was staggering. At least 3 Yasen-M nuclear attack submarines, each worth nearly $1.6 billion, were destroyed on the assembly line. Entire production plants collapsed, their roofs twisted into burning rubble. Specialized production lines for nuclear reactor modules were completely destroyed, halting work for an estimated 18 to 24 months. Analysts estimate total economic damage at $2.3 to $2.5 billion, the costliest drone attack in modern history. But the financial hit was only part of the crisis. With the shipyard crippled, Russia's naval buildup in the Baltic was abruptly halted. Projections suggest Moscow's submarine fleet will be about 30% less combat-ready over the next 5 years, leaving gaps in the country's northern deterrent. The human toll adds to the grief. Rescue teams searching the wreckage have confirmed 75 dead, and the death toll could rise as more missing workers are found. More than 120,000 square meters of industrial floor space were destroyed. Thousands of tons of raw steel, reactor hulls, and torpedo launcher components were reduced to molten scrap. The political shock was even more severe. Images of the firestorms spread across social media, and hashtags demanding accountability went viral throughout Europe and beyond. NATO officials privately described the operation in Washington and London as a textbook example of low-cost, high-impact warfare. Military analysts hailed it as one of the most effective drone strikes of the 21st century. Morale in Kiev soared. The losses in Odesa had been avenged not with billion-dollar missiles, but with ingenuity, coordination, and sheer daring. Operation Iron Swarm was a game-changer. Ukraine had demonstrated it could strike not only on the battlefield, but at the very heart of Russia's defense industry. For Moscow, the Severnaya fire was more than a military defeat. It was a psychological blow, a reminder that even the fortress of St. Petersburg was no longer impregnable. By 09:00 on September 28, 2025, the fire in St. Petersburg had raged for a day before rescuers finally brought it under control. By then, the damage was undeniable. Russia had lost more than $2.5 billion in naval assets, thousands of tons of industrial equipment, and 3 next-generation submarines. Beyond the physical damage, something much larger had changed the rules of modern warfare. A simple conclusion emerged from reviewing the operation. Brains had triumphed over steel. Operation Iron Swarm cost Ukraine less than $1 million in equipment, 540 drones at roughly $2,000 each, yet that modest investment destroyed billions of dollars worth of infrastructure and set back Russia's naval capabilities by nearly 2 years. The cost ratio was staggering. For every dollar Ukraine spent, Moscow lost more than $2,000. The lesson was clear. Modern warfare is no longer decided solely by billion-dollar missiles or fleets of heavy bombers. It is being rewritten by swarms of cheap, fragile machines controlled by intelligence, coordination, and adaptability. The Kremlin had invested decades building a fortress-like defense around St. Petersburg, dozens of S-400 and Panzer S-1 batteries, and a network of radars meant to form an impenetrable shield. Overnight, that shield was breached and outmaneuvered by drones that cost less than a guided artillery shell. International observers took note. In Washington, analysts warned the attack signaled the dawn of a new era in which a $2,000 drone could rival a $200 million warship. In London, pundits compared Iron Swarm to the tank breakthroughs of World War II, or the first use of jet aircraft, a moment when the character of war itself changed. For Ukrainians, the message was powerful and simple. The airstrike was not just revenge for Odesa, it was proof that survival, even in the face of overwhelming adversity, was possible. It proved that creativity could level the battlefield. As dawn broke over St. Petersburg, the sky remained red with smoke. The blaze was more than a fire. It was a warning written in flame in the 21st century. The winning side is not necessarily the one with the heaviest weapons, but the one that thinks fastest. The airstrikes of September 28, 2025 will be remembered not only as individual battles, but as a turning point in modern warfare. Russian cruise missiles had torn through Ukraine's last naval stronghold, killing 29 sailors, wounding 57, and crippling a base worth hundreds of millions of dollars. For a moment, Ukraine's naval future seemed to be in flames. But hours later, Kyiv responded with a campaign that changed the balance of power. With 540 drones, a force that cost less than $1 million, Ukraine leveled the Severnaya shipyard, destroyed roughly $2.5 billion in assets, and obliterated 3 Yasen-M nuclear submarines. The cost ratio, roughly 1:2,000, was not only shocking, it was historic. The Black Sea burned, St. Petersburg burned, and history turned a new page. If these stories matter, if the world must see both horror and hope, then keep the conversation alive. Share these truths, document the aftermath, and make sure silence is never the final word.